The div tag in HTML is really important. It's the divisional tag. It allows you to set up sections in your web page. So this is going to be really good for you when you start setting up a heading section and then you want the body to go somewhere else and you want the footer to go somewhere else. You can set those inside a div tag. So what does a div tag look like? Well, firstly, the tag itself is very straightforward. div and then endiv. And you'll notice that it appears just here because it's at the top of my body. Now the div tag itself will run the entire width of the page, whatever that default width is, and it has a top and bottom margin. So imagine there's a box around it, and we'll actually create that with some CSS in a moment. So we often use the div element as a container for other elements. So if I was doing navigation like we did down the bottom here, I really should put that inside a div tag, and that way I can separate it from the rest of my website. Let's have a look at doing some CSS to this div tag. So I'm going to go back to my main.css. I'm going to type in div, open my brackets, and you'll notice I've made my div background color black, and you can now see the div tag itself. So it's the entire width of the page and it has a top and bottom border. The text has disappeared because the text is also black. So let's change this color to red so we can still see our text. And I'm going to give it some padding. (20 pixels). And now you can see the padding pushing in and from the top and bottom of the border and the left and right. So div tags though are really powerful because we can do multiple div tags. So at the moment I've got one div tag in my HTML and I've got a CSS rule that will do this to all div tags I create. So let's say I want to actually change that and do multiple div tags. We can work with something called classes. So HTML class attribute specifies a class for any element. So I can have as many classes as I want. So what you can do now is assign different classes to div tags. So think of classes like an identifier. So you can have class names, for instance, for navigation, for tables, for headers, and then I can assign CSS rules to those classes. So I'm going to create a div tag that I'm going to pretend is the header of my website. So I'm going to div space class equals, and I'm going to call it header. I'm going to close my brackets, and then this is my web page header. And you'll see that appears up the top here. If I go to my main.css, and I want to talk now to the class. So I'm going to type dot header. So you need to know the name that you typed here, and you identify it by a full stop. So full stop header, and I'm going to say I want the color of this one to be white, and let's go with padding again, padding, let's go 50 pixels. And so we can see the padding, put a semicolon there. Now you can see that the padding has pushed it down from the top there. I'll make a background of black so we can really see that as well. So now I've got dot header. So this means I can put multiple divs within this project. So I might then want to put my navigation inside here. So I'm going to go div class equals, I'm going to call it nav. I'm going to close my brackets there. I'm going to close the div now here. So this is actually sitting inside a div tag. Now, let's see if my CSS that I just make up doesn't really stuff around with the CSS we've already created for the navs. So I'm going to go .nav, and I'm going to give it some padding, because I don't think we've done padding on the other ones. So padding, and I'm going to make it 50 pixels. So when you look here, that nav has dropped drastically from the border. So if I was to make the padding now 5 pixels, you'll see how it comes back up because the top bottom border isn't being pushed down as much. So it just shows you how you can play around with the div tag inside different elements. So I am able to separate sections, and a class we identify with a full stop and its name.